Good afternoon to all of you and welcome to my third session today. Uh, Let us quickly have a look what all we have already discussed in the earlier two lectures. So first PPT please. I broadly plan to discuss topics related to Disaster Management Act, Indian initiatives, Sendai framework, budget and a few additional topics. So let us see what all we have discussed in my earlier two sessions. On 26 October, we discussed disaster risk and connected subjects, hazard, vulnerability, capacity, probability, exposure, impact, economic losses, and international efforts. Then the next lecture on 27th, we discuss preparedness, HR, VCA, hazard, risk, vulnerability, capacity assessment, response, preparedness planning, coordination, equipment maintenance, information technology, its application in disaster management, early warning system, resource mobilization, a bit on finance, budget, human and non-human participation, logistical management, logistical arrangement infrastructure, and community participation. Well, let us start the topic Disaster Management Act. Now, this is the legal mandate. The prevention and mitigation effects of disasters and for undertaking holistic, coordinated and prompt response to any disaster situation, it was decided by the government to enact a law on disaster management to provide for requisite institutional mechanism for drying up and monitoring the implementation of the disaster management plans, ensuring measures by various wings of government to achieve this objective. The DM bill was introduced in the parliament. Very simple. Basically, a bill was introduced in 2005 in parliament to take care of the various aspects of disaster management. Now, this is the legal mandate. Now, if you see the chronology of time, disaster management is basically the responsibility of states. This was at the center till 2001, allotted to agricultural ministry. A very funny thing, agriculture ministry was responsible for disaster management till the time 2001. And I think the logic that time was drought was the only disaster that was recognized and that used to happen very often. In 2002, the responsibility of disaster management was transferred to Ministry of Home Affairs. Then in 1999, around, a high power committee was set up under the chairmanship of Shri J.C. Pant. He was, I think, the secretary, agricultural department. And this was before the Odisha cyclone. Then all party national committee under the chairmanship of Prime Minister was set up in 2001 after the Gujarat earthquake. DM Act, Disaster Management Act, was enacted on 23rd December 2005, and the international initiatives on disaster international decade to 1990-2000 of natural disaster reduction was started, and then the Hogyo framework for action, that is HFA, was on disaster risk reduction, was taken up in 2005 to 2015. Now in the current time, it is a Sendai framework which was started in 2015 onwards. Now the big shift, the big change in approach before and after 2005. is, as I have said, it was Agriculture Ministry which was responsible basically to begin with for drought management, which was taken as a reactive approach. It was a reactive response to disaster. That means a disaster has happened, then the relief and rehabilitation and all the support system will be activated. This philosophy was changed in 2005, and this was changed from reactive to proactive. And lot of other changes have taken place just to minimize the disaster effect, disaster losses. We have come to this topic. I thought it is worth repeating. So I just wanted to remind to you all the difference, what is emergency and what is disaster. Now, these words are mixed up like words: mishap, catastrophe, calamity, grave occurrence, emergency, disaster. I mean, these things are different. But now, these words have been defined. Emergency has been defined, and this can be found out in NDMA publication. So many words are there, but I will just say, read these words which are in red color. That means a bad situation which is within the coping capacity of the community. And same thing in disaster is beyond the coping capacity of the community. If it is manageable within the coping capacity of the community, it is defined, it is emergency. If it is beyond the coping capacity, that means we call external agencies, it is disaster. Now this is defined, included in the act. So this has a legal implication also. The act has 11 chapters. Chapter 1, it is preliminary and definitions of most of the words which are used in disaster management, that include what is the definition of disaster. Chapter 2 is the establishment of National Disaster Management Authority, its power, function, constitution, things like that. Chapter 3 is constitution, establishment of State Disaster Management Authority. So from NDMA, now the tier below that is SDMA, is powers and function. Chapter 4 is establishment of District Disaster Management Authority, same powers and functions. Chapter 5, measures by the government for disaster management, responsibilities of ministries. Different ministries have got different responsibilities. This is already mentioned in chapter 5, and in the subsequent PPT, subsequent discussion, its importance will be further elaborated. Chapter 5 is local authorities functions. That means the functions of various authorities at the local level. Chapter 7 covers National Institute of Disaster Management. We have National Disaster Management Authority, then SDMA, DDMA. Now, National Level Institute, basically for training and capacity building, is NIDM. And the first responders or the response force is National Disaster Response Force. We will have another PPT on this to discuss, but these are the various chapters which cover. Chapter 9, very important, is finance, accounts, audit, National Disaster Response Funds, National Disaster Mitigation Funds, National State Disaster Response Funds, and District Disaster Response Funds. Chapter 11, very, very important. This chapter deals with offenses, penalties, imprisonment, fine for everybody who is caught not doing properly or against whom some charge can be established. This is applicable to the people who are connected with disasters management, spread of wrong information, misappropriation. So let me read one by one. Offenses and penalties: obstruction in the management, false claim in the disaster, compensatory compensation is given to the people who are affected, but a false claim is liable to be punished. False warnings, that is something like deliberate false warning is like rumor just to create panic situation. Misappropriation, government officers, their good job and their not so satisfactory job, they are also being washed. Then cognizance of offenses. Now there are enough protections for the people who genuinely do their work, or for people who make mistakes, but that is classified under error of judgment and not deliberate. They are not negligent. But if the charge is proved, then the maximum penalty is 2 year imprisonment plus fine. But let me just tell you that this requires prior approval, prior sanction for prosecution of any government officer who is involved in government in disaster management. Chapter 11 is miscellaneous. It also mentions that there is no discrimination in assisting or in disaster management in the affected areas and people. Requisition of resources, compensation. Then it mentions something done in good faith is not liable to be penalized, even if it does not go well. Then immunity to officers, because officers do in a rush, all the procedures may be difficult to follow. There are some additional powers given to people who are in the who are who are in the chain of measurement chain of management of disasters. Then some details on NDRF, NEC, details of the members of NDMA at that time appointment done. This part has come a bit earlier. I will just see for the sake of completeness that disaster is a three-tier, we follow three-tier mechanism. So if everything is normal, that is called level 0. But if the disaster or emergency starts or there is a threatening disaster emergency, then if it is managed within the district, it is L1. If it goes beyond and it goes to the state level, it is level 2. If it goes to the national level, that means it requires intervention of central government. It is level 3. So in the district level, these are the agencies: civil admin, local police. See, this local police is always in picture. They are the people who are there, and fire and emergency services. In emergency services, we have local police, we have fire, medical, and other departments. Then when it grows, the disaster level increases, then state disaster response force. When it goes beyond that, then NDRF. And sometimes it may require the involvement of defense people, CAPF, other central agencies, as and when required, but normally it is managed within NDRF. In disaster management, we have, as you say, as you have seen, emergency, disaster, natural disaster, and human-aided disasters. Now, this course is moving from disaster to now CBRN. So, how do you compare and what this CBRN is having a separate identity? It is important to understand that a CBRN situation, a CBR emergency situation, is not like a flood type of situation or not like a natural disaster type of situation, where once the water recedes, people can be sent back to homes. In this case, the level of contamination may take, in this case, in CBRN case, the area affected or the persons affected or the equipment affected may be contaminated by radioactive materials or by chemicals, and that may take long time to be cleaned. Especially in the radiological emergency, it may take very, very long time, months and sometimes years, before people can be sent to their respective homes. In addition, the first responders, that is the relief and rescue teams, are also exposed to radiation dose in case of radioactive material, or let us say chemical risk, chemical hazard, or biological hazards, which may be detrimental to their health. If not controlled, such situation is not there for other natural disasters. So that is how CBRN is, it comes under different family of emergency disasters. First thing is, it is like a long drawn process management wise. Second is the responders also require safety measures. They have to be trained, and will come when the CBRN portion starts. Most of the CBRN cases are instrument based. That means it is not possible for a human being to detect and know the seriousness of it. In case of chemical disasters, chemical emergencies, the response time or the lead time required for responding to a situation is very, very less. It may be minutes. In case of radiological and nuclear cases, it may be several minutes to hours. And in case of biological, the whole world is now experienced because of pandemic, it may take months and years. In disaster management, which is also mentioned in the National Disaster Management Plans (NDMP) published by National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA), and part of the other frameworks, mainstreaming of disaster risk reduction. That means disaster activities, disaster related projects, disaster dedicated manpower, and most important is disaster funds or finance has to be mainstreamed in the activities of a department, activities of a facility or a ministry. That means development and disaster management, they have to be together. They have to have hand in hand. It should be kept in mind that development is not possible if we ignore disaster management, if we ignore disaster risk. So mainstreaming means whatever is the plan, for a facilities or a ministry's development, a area's development, or let us say a country's development, it should always factor disaster emergency management in its program. So this is called mainstreaming. It cannot happen, it should not happen that a ministry or a facility, or let us say for that purpose, a district or airport or a big factory, suddenly say they have suddenly an emergency which for which they are not ready. They are not ready technology wise, they are not ready manpower wise, they are not ready finance wise. Because if such a situation happen, then the losses that will come to the facility will be much more than it can be managed if it is mainstreamed. I think it is good enough to say that mainstreaming of DRR is the extensive and sound integration of DRR into all developments. Mainstreaming disaster risk reduction is an approach in which both development and disaster risk reduction incorporated concurrently. Well, I will just give you a few examples that how the country is prepared, how the nation is prepared for certain types of CBR and emergencies. Now, this is one setup which is called Indian Environmental Radiation Monitoring Network. All over India at different locations, around 500 such instruments are like self-standing, stand-alone. These instruments operate on solar cells. They have got instruments in the system which can measure two levels of radiation, very, very high and medium level. And it will be useful for monitoring radiation in the environment. And all these instruments have mobile chip which periodically share the data with a central monitoring system, central environmental radiation monitoring surveillance system. Now this center is monitored by Department of Atomic Energy, which is the nodal department in case of radiological emergencies. Such an instrument is also there in the terrace of National Disaster Management Authority. They are available in so many places. Big cities have got multiple. Now, these are the places where NDRF battalions are located. Right now, there are 16 battalions, but this is ever growing. I think when it started in 2005 or 6, there were 8 battalions. Now, out of these, some battalions were specialized. We are given the special training and equipment instrument to take care of CBRN. After a few years, the strategy was changed. All the battalions were partly equipped with CBRN, depending upon let us say the field feedbacks, depending upon emergencies, and for optimum use of the expert manpower in the NDRF system. Now, these are the 16 places now where NDRF battalions are located. Now, each battalion has neighborhood cities, big installation, places in their immediate connection where the teams are posted. Now, teams around 40 responders, which includes an officer who takes overall supervision, overall command of the team. Let us say the nearest disaster management responders to Mumbai is 5th Battalion, which is near Pune city. But NDRF has got a team posted in Mumbai city. Same thing in, let us say, Delhi. All these battalions have got in the nearest place, and I think subsequently this NDRF details will come again, and there is going to be a separate lecture by NDRF representatives who will be able to tell you more about their preparedness. But we feel it is very, very fortunate. We are very lucky that such a responders setup is there in this country, and everybody knows about their dedication to the duty and how they save the life and properties. For monitoring of radiation near the nuclear power plant, there are instruments as a part of decision support system, Indian real-time online system, which takes radiation, which monitors radiation values, and it keeps on updating. Irman have already told you, now this is around, it is more than 500. This is continuously increasing. This is a dynamic number. Air, water, food, health, environment, everything is monitored near all big radiation and nuclear facilities. These are the places where radiation monitoring is done, and responders are available who can be called in a short notice, and they work in case of any suspected radiation issues or nuclear issues, and they also help the local people and NDRF people. If NDRF people need their help, they are available. But one has to keep it clear that this department comes under Department of Atomic Energy, who are expert in the science and technology part of it. But the on the ground manpower and other resources details have to be provided by the concerned districts and states. Okay, National Disaster Management Authority. Now this was constituted, and this is basically a policy maker body, and it is directly headed by Prime Minister as per the DM Act. It has members who take care of various aspects of disasters, and you can see the building here. You can see the building here. There is a National Disaster Management Authority building in Delhi. No, this is an NIDM, which I said this was also constituted as a part of DM Act 2005. Their main job is capacity building, training in disaster management. And they also run a lot of training programs, a lot of training courses in various aspects of disasters. They compile data after every big disaster, release reports, and that is a great help in data generation, data sharing. Now, this is our most celebrated, I would say, response force, National Disaster Response Force. Right now, there are 18 battalions, 16 battalions located in different locations, and all the battalions have a few teams which are, a few trained responders, manpower, expert in CBRN. They are also equipped with reduction instruments. They are also equipped with chemical instrument and equipment, and they are equipped with PPEs. In case of any situation where a CBRN or a potential CBRN situation is there, now these people are available in the shortest possible time with stand-alone arrangement. Now, I have myself gone to so many battalion locations, and I feel so assured seeing them that in case of any emergency or disaster, they are there all the time, fully equipped, and they are like the responders on wheel. Means some of the team people are always available with their vehicle ready. The moment the order comes or the moment the information comes about disaster, they move immediately without waiting for anything else. And they have earned a big name within India, outside India also. They are the people who reach first and do that. And you see in the photograph, they were invited especially in the very popular TV program, Kaun Banega Crorepati. Now, a bit about funds. Disaster causes loss of life, loss of property, damage to environment, and important to avoid this, important to minimize this. But for that, we need to deploy some people, some expertise, and of course, some funds. So for that purpose, the Government of India and all the state governments keep some funds aside. And the present formula used is Government of India, Central Government of India shares 90% of the disaster funds in the normal states, and the balance is shared by state government. But in the UTs and states with a special category, central government contributes 75%, and the rest is shared by the state government. No, sorry, central government. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Normally, central government contributes 75% and the state government contributes 25%. Okay. And The states or the union territories where there is a special status, central government contributes 90% of the fund, then 10% balance is shared by the respective states and the local authority. Now, how this is achieved, how much money is required, there are formula for it, and the formula is basically the feedback from the earlier departments, earlier disasters, that makes a big basis. Okay. Now these are that we'll come back. This topic is again going to come after a few PPTs. How the funding is done and how this is basis for calculation. Now these are the photographs. Some of them are pictures or maps which are available. It may not be possible to cover here in a big term, but this keeps on. This updates us on. Let us say this is particularly on the flood hazard. Which part of the country is prone to flood? And as we have discussed earlier, that these are all very dynamic information. They keep on changing. You are now seeing, we are all seeing that the areas which never have rains are now facing flood. So these maps keep on changing. Now this is a case of cyclone. Okay, the dark blue color is very high. Cyclone one can see this coastal area. If you see very carefully, it tells you that these areas are highly affected. So that means we need to keep more funds for them, more preparedness, priorities on this. This is on earthquake, seismic activity. So can you put this up? Okay. Now this shows in Richter scale. This star, this color. This is more than 6.5 Richter scale. The dark red color and the small dots. The smaller the dot, the milder the earthquake. But we can see a good part of India, that means in the Himalayan belt and the northeast, is high risk areas as far as ground motion concerns. This is earthquake zoning. Normally it is into this is very high. This is normally categorized into 4 zones. Very high, that means high risk. Then another very high risk to moderate to low risk. Okay, now this is the, I would say, government governance or command mechanism. The bodies, the government decision-making bodies in case of disaster, the top body in case of disaster management to take decisions in case of disaster. You see the policy is already made by NDMA. But in case of disaster, the top body is Cabinet Committee on Security. Now this is headed by Prime Minister. They are normally involved if the disaster is of higher magnitude, more severe, and that may involve in national level or sometimes international level participation. This has all the important defense, finance, home, Ministry of External Affairs, and wherever needed, the concerned department is co-opted. Then NCMC, that is National Crisis Management Committee, which is headed by Cabinet Secretary, who is the chair, who acts as a chairman, and secretaries of all the important departments are members of this, and wherever needed, additional secretaries and departments are involved. Then National Disaster Management Authority under the chairmanship of Prime Minister, which has members maximum 9. Right now we have 4 members nominated by the chairperson. Then we have National Executive Committee. Now National Executive Committee is chaired by Home Secretary, Union Home Secretary. Now this is like a working hand or executive hands of NDMA. Whatever comes out from NDMA or other agencies, now this is like executive committee. Now NDRF we have already discussed. Right now there are about 16 battalions positioned at different locations. Then NIDM basically for training. Now these are the various nodal ministries. They are not exhaustive. Some more are there, but now these are important. Biological, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Chemical and Industrial Chemical, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Now I'll come back to CBRN, Nuclear and Radiological. This comes as a technical expert under the Department of Atomic Energy. As I've already clarified, this department gives the technical know-how and expertise in terms of instrument, measurement, advice, but the resources, logistics have to be provided by the concerned government, state government or districts. Let us come to funds. Here, the statewide fund allocation, right now the approach, this approach is, let us say, the very recent approach. It depends upon three factors. One is capacity of the affected area or affected state. That means is reflected through past expenditure. That means for a similar incident, what was the capacity of the community or capacity of the state or capacity of the district. Next is risk. That means how is the area, how bad is the area, and how is the population affected. And third is called disaster risk index, which is a combination of hazard and vulnerability. Now these three combined together, there are ways of assessing. They make the case of what fund has to be provided or what fund has to be allotted. So in general, the present allotment duration is 2021-2025 as per the Finance Commission. ₹1,60,153 crore rupees is the total allotment for disaster during this period of 2021 to 26. Out of this, somewhere down we are going to see further that the focus is not full on disaster management. There is a need for risk management. That means if you manage the risk, the disaster effects or disaster impact is less. So out of that, 80% money goes in the disaster risk, disaster SDRF, state disaster risk funding, and then 20% goes in the state disaster mitigation funding. So this is risk, this is mitigation. Then response and relief takes 40%. Recovery and reconstruction take 30%. Absolute amounts are also given. And preparedness and capacity building takes around 40%. So this is the amount given for the current current time zone, that is current 5 years, 21 to 26, as per a disaster management course. But whenever there is a disaster, these are all dynamic and change as and when required. We'll have a short break, maybe 2-3 minutes. We'll come back because some people have suggested they are not very comfortable, they don't need any break. Welcome back. There's a question from one of the participants which says, what is the meaning of MN? So I've requested her to elaborate it further and whether any particular, she's referring to any particular PPT in our this discussion session. All right, thank you. So we'll take the other part of today's session, that is international efforts in disaster management. The current framework which is in vogue is Sendai framework. See, in 1994, the first initiative at the international level started, Yokohama, Japan. Then in 2005 to 2015, 1 decade, another frame was activated, let us say started, that is Hogyo framework. And the present is, which was started in 2015, is Sendai framework. All are in Japan, and we will touch part of these things in the coming 10-15 minutes. Intensifying diverse disaster trends and more frequent events. Now, the severity and intensity of natural disaster is increasing. So, it can be two ways. Because the urbanization is taking place, there is a population rise, the disaster damage, disaster affects more people more severely, and because of population and urbanization, its intensity increases. We need to do more. Natural disaster, not in our hands, but it is possible to reduce the risk. Then interdependency and complexity of risk drivers has increased. Then resource scarcity and degradation of energy and natural capital, land, water, food, all because of population urbanization. Climate change, very open issue, and a lot of activities and a lot of international efforts are going on. India is also one of the signatories. Increasing risk of unplanned rapid urbanization, a big cause. Increasing governance challenges, coordination, accountability, legislation, all these things affect. So we need to put more efforts in disaster management. Now, in 2015, recognizing the increasing impact and complexity of disasters and going to strengthen risk reduction approach, all the states who have joined this initiative, they adopted a framework on 18th March 2015 at the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction held in Japan. This is a World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, and which was also endorsed by United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, in June 2015, underlying the strong political support to move ahead on its implementation. So, in 2015, there was a congregation of all the members to reduce the disaster effect, to reduce the disaster risk, and this was adopted by UN General Assembly to get strong political support to move ahead on its implementation. The three documents set the stage for future global actions, and all the three documents are very crucial in disaster management: short term, medium term, long term. And they happened in 2015. So one, this we have now discussed in the first para here is Sendai framework. Second is Sustainable Development Goals under UNGA, United Nations General Assembly. Then conference of parties. This is dedicated to mostly climate related issues. And in the coming 15 years, now this is a time frame of 15 years, the substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihoods and health, etc. Now, these are all the expected outcome in 50 years. Now, why it is expected? Because these are all like voluntarily participation. There is nothing law and there is nothing like international penalty on this. These are all like best efforts to be made because things may not follow the exactly same thing which is planned as per design. So it may also happen that there could be a genuine reason, like beyond the coping capacity of the community, that may become a bigger issue. But this is a voluntary effort that everybody has to follow, all the member states have to follow to reduce the disaster risk, loss of life, livelihood and health, prevent new risk, reduce the risk. Now, whenever there are disasters and there are big relief rehabilitation, build back better that we discussed yesterday or earlier lecture before that. Whatever is happening further has to be superior in design, superior in strength, more scientific, so that disaster of that intensity, if it strikes again, should not damage whatever level was there earlier. So this is done only by improving the design or improving the construction or improving your efforts. So this is build back better. Then the primary responsibility of states to prevent and reduce disaster risk shift their focus from managing disasters to managing risk. Now this is very, as I have just prepared earlier. Now this has to be done. Managing risk gets a priority over managing disaster. And this is also important in the fund utilization. There is a marked fund for disaster risk. To reduce the risk in case of disaster, the losses are less, the damage is less. There are 7 global targets of the Sendai framework to achieve by 2030. It uses 38 indicators. Actually, it is given in form of a chart and it is a measurable, it can be measured, it can be assessed fairly accurately. So there are 7 targets, out of which 4 to be reduced, 3 to be increased, and there are 38 indicators within this. Like mortality should be reduced. Affected people, number of affected people should be reduced. Economic losses should be reduced. Critical infrastructure and basic services damage should be reduced. Now, these are the 4 things which should be reduced. And in the Sunday framework, it is given in form of a number. So the earlier for a similar disaster, the mortality rate per 100,000 people or per 100,000 population is, let us say, X. So the Sendai framework says it should be substantially reduced. In fact, in many places, India has done excellent. India has done great and it is greatly reduced. Now, what is to be increased is number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies should be increased. International cooperation should be increased. The availability of and access to multi-hazard early warning system. Early warning system is very, very important in case of disasters and which is seen as a big improvement, a very, very big improvement, very, very big improvement because of improvement in technology, Satellites do a big role in this. Now this can be shown like this, that four priorities for action: disaster risk, governance to manage. Now these are the four priorities given. How it can be achieved is understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk by so many methods that we have already discussed, investing in disaster risk reduction. Now this investing is, finance is though an important part, but more equally important is priority. Let us say a political, what I should say, a political preference. That means in policy we feel that this has to be done in terms of training people, in terms of making people at the panchayat level, at the district level, at school level, college level, everywhere. See, a well-trained community, can do a big thing in disaster risk reduction, because whenever there's a disaster, a lot of things they can manage before a big damage takes place. Now, translate words into action. UNISDR, United Nations International translate words in United Level International Strategy for Disaster Risk will work with key partners to support countries. Now, systematically, now these are the 5 bullets. Systematically integrate of disaster risk reduction. This is the UN Charter. In national health policies, integrate disaster risk reduction into health education. Well, health education or health is like a cross-cutting area. Now, this is one thing which is useful everywhere. Like in case of disaster, relief, rehabilitation, health is important. In case of biological disaster, biological emergencies, endemics and pandemics, health becomes an issue. So a good health, good education, and a good health education infrastructure at every level, they are very, very useful. Then these are like cross-cutting subjects. Incorporate disasters-related mortality, morbidity, and disability data into multi-hazard early warning system. Advocate for and support cross-sectoral and transboundary collaboration for all hazards. Promote coherence and further development of national and local strategies and plans, as well as framework for laws, regulations, and I think these are all obvious. As we read, we understand. So this is all under United Nations International Strategy for disaster risk, disaster reduction. Now, in conclusion, it is clear that the Sendai framework has fully embraced the multi-sectoral, interdisciplinary, and cross-cutting nature of natural disaster reduction, and also the concept of health resilience is a key focus for DRR. Now, this is last. Last. Okay, we cannot prepare during an outbreak or crisis, meaning disaster preparation has to be done much in advance. When there is a crisis, we can't prepare. Now, these are the lessons that can be at the best learned subsequently. We have to do the work in advance and we have to test it. That means the disaster preparedness has to be ready and it should be kept battle ready, time tested. More important is CBRN. Because CBRN is one thing, one type of emergency which, though now some patterns are seen, wherever you have more chemicals, hazards are more, but CBRN has got another risk of it's misuse, malicious act. So that makes it more important and more sudden. That insists that it should be kept ready all the places, all the time. And most importantly, we do need the institutions of the kind represented here to work together, continue interaction, cooperation, and partnership to achieve jointly agreed disaster restoration goals and priorities. So these are the conclusions of Sendai framework. There was a question. There was a question from one of the participants. Madam, the question is, what is MN? So actually it is given in the PPT. It is Metropolitan Network. Metropolitan Network. It is not a very standard abbreviation. It has created, but both, everything is written there only. It is, this is the MN and this is the Metropolitan Network. So apart from this, I just wanted to, 1 second. All right. So right now, if we see the disaster situation in our country, though we are like uh, in the top 5 in the list in the world, disaster prone, highly disaster prone. Population wise also, we are very populous country. But after 2005, the scenario has changed big way. After the setting up of NDMA, NDRF, and a big effort being made by all these agencies in training, in prioritization, disaster and emergency related training, instrument, equipment, and a very frequent exercises, field exercises. The data has already been shared earlier that there is a unbelievably good big improvement in management of this in terms of loss of life or in terms of loss of property, especially management, disaster management due to cyclone, flood has, it has brought the disaster damages to a very, very low value, very, very acceptable value. I mean, one may not be able to believe. I was in the month of March, I was in USA for a short time, and I got this information that there was a tornado in one area in USA. I thought this was predicted some 24 hours earlier, so there should not be a problem. People can be evacuated. But I was shocked to know after 1 or 2 days when the tornado affected that area, some 25 people died there. Now, this was difficult for me to believe for an advanced country when satellite is watching and it is possible to predict the speed, the area, people there with so much of messaging system, so much of internet connectivity. Still that happens. But I think we are that much better. In many places, our NDRF people have got such a good name in India outside that I mean, it may not be good to quote individually, but they are just doing wonderful. But the side effect is, I had gone to one battalion, one NDRF person was telling me, because they have become very efficient, very effective, very, very dependable. So they are welcome everywhere. But the local agencies which are supposed to be taking care of those things, they depend upon NDRF so much that they are losing their own effort. So to that extent, NDRF become very popular. They have become very, very effective. So if there's any question, we will take it up. Otherwise, there are some more topics connected to disaster management. One is incident response system. In case of big disasters, large disasters, how the command and control system is affected, how the command and control system is utilized. That will be discussed in that. Then there is going to be lecture dedicated to dispersion modeling in case of chemicals. Now we will be moving after a while, after maybe one lecture, to CBRN side. So then general disaster management, rules and regulations and those things now we have discussed. We'll now move to CBRN. So let me see any question. क्वेश्चन मेरे को मेल में आ सकता है, मैं नोट करूँ. Are you online? Is it live? Okay. We have a few more questions coming, and what I suggest is these questions are very, very specific and they require specific references. I am going to answer these questions through email to the participants. So some 3-4 questions are there. So I will elaborate further. I'm going to close it at 4:15 now, time-wise. So your email ID is available with us, madam. I will send the response to you. So thank you very much. And will be delivered by the next faculty member. You will get the program details from the desk of course director. Thank you very much.